Hiram, can I just check if we're actually quorate at the moment?
Yes, we are.
Wonderful. Okay. I think we would like to start. Can I then request that all of the members of the public are therefore not in view and are muted? Yeah, as was agreed beforehand. Okay, thank you. If you want to, so just welcome everybody. Just to remind anybody that's dialing in that this is a board meeting in public, not a public board meeting. We will be taking questions if they've actually been put in advance within the required timeline. We ask those members of the board to please raise their hand if possible. If you don't seem to catch my eye, which sometimes happens, then please use the chat line if you feel that I haven't seen that you wanted to ask a question. I think that we very much like the idea of doing these in public. This is the second one that we've tried, and of course we'll be very happy to take any comments about the way that we're doing it, but the intention is very much for you to see the board business as it operates. Hiram, is there anything else that we needed to say just from that point of view before I move on just to the apologies for absence?
No, so just to highlight that the meeting will also be recorded because we do publish these on our website as well.
Yes, yes. I do actually see some of our members of public are still in view. So is that being dealt with externally?
Sorry, so we have asked the members of public to come off video because that was something that we requested. So it's through their video that they would need to switch it off.
So that's a polite request to actually go off your video link, please, those members of the public who are still in view.
We have two on view still. So Jeff, if you could turn off your video camera, that would be helpful. And Steve, if you could as well, please.
And let's be clear, the reason for this request is so that I as chair can actually make sure that those members of the board who want to speak are able to speak. So this is a reminder, this is a polite request for you to please turn off your camera, Mr. Day. Thank you. Okay, now we move on. Okay, apologies for absence, please, Hiram.
Sure. So we've received apologies from Daniel Carlton Conway, Jane Halpin, and Richard Pyle.
Okay, and can we now actually just present the interest to declare and then talk about how they're going to be managed, please?
So for this particular board meeting, we don't have any conflicts that we need to note.
Thank you. Okay. Just for members of the public who are dialing in, we publish our managing conflicts of interest policy and all board members complete that. It is regularly updated as per NHSE guidance. So thank you for that. Okay, so I move on to the minutes of the last meeting held in public, which was on the 28th of May. And if you're working from the board pack, this is pages 9 and 10. So I'm asking for that for accuracy, please. Pages 11 and 12 on the board pack, which is 3 and 4 on the actual agenda minutes, and pages 5. So any matters arising or points of accuracy that the board want to note. Okay, I will take that as read, and I will also now just ask you to approve those. Are the board in approval? Just raise your hands if you're in approval, please. Thank you very much. Okay, so move on now to the action tracker, and I think David, are you just going to talk us through these, or is it Katie? In terms of, we still have 3 open ones, is that correct?
That is, Nicholas. So Katie, do you want to pick up the first one, please?
Okay, so to say the Q1 BAF report is on the agenda today, and we will be taking the BAF that's been updated so far to committees. It's already been to the Public Involvement Committee, and we'll be taking it to Quality, Performance, Finance Committees and Commissioning Exec for further discussion, and then coming back to the board in September.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Okay, and the next one is the CEO report. Is there anything else to say on that, David?
So well, the next one in my pack is the UTC trip that we were going to arrange a site visit. Probably still not wise to do that in this current situation, but as soon as it's available, we will and it's safe, we will take the board for a visit, and it has launched, and it's part of my update later, Nicholas.
Thank you. And then finally, Avni, who's the owner of the last item.
So the last item is scheduled to be on the agenda for the September board meeting. We will provide the board an update on the progress made on adult community services.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, Iram, one of the things I just noted, did we have any questions submitted by the deadline?
No, we've had no questions come in.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, so move on to the next item, which is the items that were approved virtually. So there were two items here that have been approved virtually. First of all, the risk and strategy management procedure. Can I ask whoever's not on mute to please go on mute? So Katie or Iram, is there anything that we need to say on that?
Yes, so the 2 papers were the risk and strategy management procedure and the standards of business conduct policy. These were both circulated to the board and approved virtually. So just in addition, we had, in relation to these papers, Paul Smith had asked for the board to note the audit committee recommendations for next steps. And therefore the minutes from the audit committee were also circulated to the board.
Okay, thank you. So they have been approved, just for noting. Okay, thank you. Okay, now move on to our strategic discussion items, and this is my opportunity to welcome David as our newly appointed Managing Director. Jane Halpin is now our Joint Accountable Officer and CEO. So David, over to you.
Thank you, Nicholas. Board will note that there is a report, first MD report of in the new current structure, and I think it's really highlighting some of the key areas of work that the organisation has been taking place over the last few months. And I guess really it's been a challenge of kind of 3 or 4 fronts really. So we've been managing the incident, we've been in recovery and restoration, and we've also been managing our statutory responsibilities as a commissioning group. And I just really at this point want to publicly acknowledge the hard work the flexibility of all the staff within the CCG who have committed tirelessly, I think, to managing this level 4 incident. We still remain in that incident, and that will continue for the foreseeable future while we're in the uncertainties of the COVID world and moving towards winter. We do need to acknowledge that working from home has been a challenge, and for some staff it's been liberating, and the way in which we've set our technology up over the CCG has really helped us leaps and bounds in moving back to virtual working. But everyone has had their own experience to tell, and I think we've provided support to staff, which includes opportunities to ensure they're equipped to work at home, but also that they're managing some of the emotional health and well-being support where they need some help and have been struggling on a personal level through this pandemic. So I think as a CCG, we are fully committed to supporting the health and well-being of our staff. And I just want to say thank you to everybody in the organisation that's taken part in such a challenging times. We've seen staff redeployed across numerous settings, so it really has felt like one NHS, and some people have moved into completely alien territory to their current work. I mean, we've had our medicines optimization team and pharmacy team move into HPFT, move into the trust, and provide work that they wouldn't have done previously within their CCG roles. And all of that learning has come back, and we've shared that at staff briefings from everybody who's been redeployed to encourage staff to feel like they're part of one system. And I think all of that will help us with our ICP development, our integrated care partnership development, and we will continue to hold those weekly staff meetings going forward. What we have done, though, is learnt significantly in relation to the kind of wins, and I think Diane always said there were silver linings in the COVID experience. And over the last 4 months, I think we've really come to learn where the system has benefited from the move in the direction of travel that we've been on, and what we might begin to transform into the future. So we're going to build on areas of success, and we've talked about this at our Integrated Care Partnership Board and our Local Delivery Board, and some of the key themes that have come across our discharge to assess, the way in which we've been able to move patients out of the hospital to safe and appropriate settings has been fantastic. Some of our transformational work in supporting care homes with the CHIT team and the training and providing resilience into those homes, again, another piece of work we want to build on. We have the virtual consultations, we have the virtual hospitals as well. All of this will start breeding what will be a new kind of NHS and social care offer, and our integrated care partnership will be part of that. And these projects were developed during and as a direct result of the pandemic, so it really has turbocharged some of our work going forward. And really they're the big kind of foundations that lots of this report will talk to and enable us to kind of think about how we might strategically go forward into the future. One area that I did want to pick up on was development of the ICS. Has taken a step forward as well in terms of the Tier 2 appointment process. And the first process has been concluded with some key roles in the ICS executive team. Dr. Jane Halpin was appointed 3 manager director roles, the chief finance officer role and the director of nursing role. Just to confirm, the newly appointed managing directors are Peter Whiteman at West Essex CCG, Sian Oughton at East and North Arts CCG, and myself here at Herts Valleys. Alan Pond has been appointed as Chief Financial Officer across all 3 CCGs, and Jane Kinnember as Director of Nursing and Quality. And I know that members of the public who and members of our organisation will welcome this progress, but we are obviously sad and disappointed to hear that Di, our own Director of Nursing, was not successful in that role. And I know that everyone, including the recruiting panel, recognises Di's huge contribution that you've provided to the NHS, Di, 34 years with considerable commitment and effort into the system. And you've led on the CCG's incident management of the current level 4 pandemic, and your dedication has been second to none. And I just want to say thank you to that and all of your efforts that you've put in. I know that we're all going to miss you. Di's last day will be the 31st of July. You've contributed immensely to my own development and development of others in the CCG. And I'm sure board members later in the meeting will want to express their thanks to you as well. But I know that personally from my report, I wanted it noted that you've done some fantastic work, and a big thank you and good luck for the future. So in terms of operational areas, we know that testing over the last month has significantly increased. Local provisions, especially for the antigen testing, across Hertfordshire, 6 days of mobile military testing, and now we have a permanent regional testing site based at Tesco's headquarters in Welwyn Garden City, which is open 7 days a week. And this has the capacity for 600 swabs a day, which is significant and will enable us to manage some of our outbreak and potential lockdown plans into the future. I won't go through the entire report here, but what you can see is the numbers of people who have been tested, and especially around the antigen testing as well. So some real positive movement in that space, which will support us into the future. We do have a Hertfordshire outbreak plan that's now been published. For primary care, a pan-Hertfordshire outbreak cell has also been established. And this will support the delivery and provide governance for the plan alongside our county council and public health teams and colleagues, which will mean that when and if we have to mobilise anything of this nature, we will be doing this as a concerted partnership. An update around urgent care. So we know that the Watford Urgent Treatment Centre was fully operational on the 1st of July, with the exception of paediatrics. We've agreed at a joint board on the 10th of June, children will continue to be seen in the paediatric emergency department, and that's worked successfully in terms of partnership between West Herts Trust and Greenbrook, who are the provider. You'll see some interesting early data that does demonstrate that there is a percentage of individuals that are going to be decompressed from A&E, and if this continues, it will be a really good source of support into the future. And I think we're all pleased that this is, including the Trust and Greenbrook, that we've been able to launch this even throughout the pandemic. Integrated urgent care, Hucken, our NHS 111 provider, is reporting that calls are returning now to pre-COVID levels following the pandemic's peak. This has really helped because 111 at the beginnings of this was significantly under pressure. And again, thanks to GPs in our patch who 111 during that process. We've recently commenced work at an ICS level across the system, integrated care system, on Think NHS 111 First programme. And this programme of work will expand the use of existing underutilised IUC services, emergency services in secondary care dispositions. So it will really support where we're moving patients around the county. Children and young people's update. CAMHS is probably one of the biggest impacted areas, as you'd expect, during something of this nature where children have been off school and potentially in vulnerable situations. There was a survey that was covered almost 700 children and young people and found that learning at home had been difficult for the majority of respondents, citing the volume of work and set and unrealistic expectations alongside the effect of their mental health. We had our emotional health and wellbeing board yesterday, where we have a secondary school representative who represents the entirety of secondary schools in Hertfordshire and a primary school one. And they are both keen to get children back into school and keen to begin to support them. But they do feel that from September onwards, some of the I guess outcomes of being in a lockdown and away from their education establishments and their friends for such a period of time will start to have an impact. So we do need to plan, I think, around coming into winter, what mental health support we provide to those children, because the immediate rush of meeting your friends masks what will be the longer term need going forward once everything settles down and we go back into what is ever the new normal, as is quoted. We have had some immunisations maintained, and we have seen members of Herts Community Trust redeployed to support those those activities. And as you can see, there's other areas of support that have been provided around ENT and ophthalmology teams. Brief primary care update. I think this has really been transformational, and I'm sure you'd all agree that we've seen access to video consultations really kick off in the last couple of months. This has enabled us to use software that we weren't previously using, and it's enabled addition of telephone triage and to standard consultation, and probably a position that we'll never go back on. The CCG has enabled that via 400 laptops with additional funding from NHSC to increase the availability for general practitioners to operate in this way. Also, a big thanks to extended access offer that's been made across the system as part of the CCG's response to COVID and to help Hert's urgent care. High volumes of calls to 111. The extended access services were asked to pause and supported 111. So as I talked about earlier, feels like a bit of a team effort that we've been able to create here, and that's really supported the movement going forward. I think one of our shining stars in this whole approach has been the respiratory hubs and the work that's been done across 4 localities. The key principles here were to virtualize patient care, to minimize patient face-to-face contact, and enable the hot hubs to support face-to-face assessments where it was safe and in an environment that meant that everybody's needs could be met from clinician to patient. This has been a fantastic piece of work, and there will be a future plan for how we manage these and a decision at some point in the future where we will continue to operate these hot hubs going into the winter, and how we will provide resilience to the trust and other partners in the system. So some fantastic work taking place in that space. I won't go through them all, but we have shielded home visiting service that's also been established, and this has helped develop the support sustainability of GP practices, and in particular the up and coming winter months and the flu season. So this will be a way in which we can support people who are still vulnerable and still requiring shielding during these times. Child IMS I've covered, and our work to care homes has been fantastic. In response to the letter that we had from Simon Stevens, the CCG, part of its enhanced commissioning framework, has aligned its GP practices to residential and nursing homes, and that was done previously, and it enabled us to enact the support and the kind of support that was required going forward. Primary care networks. So we're now in a position where we formally were introduced in 1920, and there were 16 PCNs approved across the 4 localities. Only 1 G practice was not included as part of a PCN. The 2021 PCNs were required to submit a participation form on the 31st of May to identify their continued support in participating in the DES. So the CCG received 100% sign up. However, the structure of the PCNs has slightly changed now, and we've moved from 16 to 17, and that's been managed by the primary care team really well, given the challenges that presents. In planned care, as you would expect me to talk about, a lot of this has been around recovering services that were either paused or had to reduce the level of delivery that they had available to them during the pandemic, and the report focuses on some of the key areas that we are looking at bringing back up to being operational. I think the key message is that West Herts Hospital Trust are now accepting all routine referrals and have been since the 15th of June. And there is some great partnership working between our local GPs, consultants and the CCG to enable us to get the pathways as effective as possible and start seeing services being delivered. But we do know that the key theme is to make sure that people who have highest level of acuity need to be seen, and how we manage that in a safe and risk-free way. This brings me then on to cancer. So the 2-week wait referral numbers have doubled in May to 1,004, but it's still below what we had last year. So we do think that there is some build-up of people who have not gone to seek support, and how we can start increasing the message that the NHS is open and it's safe to get treatment from. So this will be a build-up. We are focusing 100% on this one because this is where the high risk is, and there's national campaigns as well to encourage people to attend for healthcare services for urgent and cancer symptoms. So this is a big area of focus for us to make sure that our population remains safe. Again, respiratory services, an update there around the virtual hospital and the joint working as well between West Herts Hospital Trust and our local GPs. And again, something that we will take as part of our recovery and silver linings into our transformation space for other specialties in the coming months. Adult community services, I think it's fair to say CLCH have been fantastic during this period as well. Some of their key areas around responding have been the in-reach and discharge to assess, and as a community inpatient hubs and community nursing and therapy have been key themes and services that they've been able to provide. And so a thank you to our partners at CLCH for their response. And the Rapid Response Service went live on the 1st of July, so they're continuing to develop even while in this space. West Herts capital plans. So there is an item as a verbal update which will be covering some just of the engagement work that's taken place. But in reality, the development of hospital services has taken an important step forward. There has been joint engagement, and Juliet will talk about that later in the meeting. But the CCG approval and the West Herts Hospital Trust submission of the strategic outline case to regulators last summer, the Trust has now received approval to proceed to the next stage of outline business case. Really positive news. You know, the funding has been made available. The approval notification also indicates that enhanced redevelopment and rebuild of Watford General Hospital could be included as an option if appropriate. So there are still challenges around what the financial availability will be, but that has to be assessed in the round and including all of the other options. And the public engagement has expressed some of those areas that will need to be looked at in more detail. So just to conclude, HR and organisational development, so much has gone on. So if you look at the report that I've just presented, that's just a snapshot of the work that's been taking place. And we've really, you know, felt that it's important to keep the health and well-being of our staff at the forefront of the work we do. We know that they're tired, we know they're fatigued, we know they've had to work in new and different ways. So we've put in place bespoke health and wellbeing intranet page that was created in April to support what might be coming ahead. We've offered support through Speak Up Champions, and national and local coaching and mentoring support has been available as well alongside other online tools. Really is important that we provide this during this time. Even when people have taken leave, they've not had you know, the usual holiday plans that they would have gone on to decompress from work, and sometimes some of their home lives has been or issues have been heightened in what is a challenging time, whether that be family members who are at risk of the economic position that the country finds itself in or not. But we just know that we need to make sure that the right people are supported. As part of our move back to the forum at some point, we will be focusing on those who will benefit and have a need to go back to work much quicker than others. So that's our key theme, and that is part of our work. And as you can see, there's lots of assistant programs, health and wellbeing webinars, and the Optima Life program has been really positively received by our staff as well. We can't not mention the BAME survey and network that we've worked on. Risk assessments are in process across the CCG to ensure that the health and wellbeing of all staff, including BAME staff, have been adequately considered in relation to their roles. We've launched a BAME staff consultation on the 8th of July, and the closing date will be the 24th. Staff survey results over the last 3 years, and some of the outputs that we need to address and deal with over the next year as part of our organisation. So they're really the key areas. You will see the Tier 2 process recommence. That was happened this week. Jane Halpin is currently engaging with the 4 chairs of the current members of the executive team to ensure the right composition to lead the ICS moving forward. So it is likely, though, that other roles, like the Director of People and other posts that have not been appointed to, would be advertised across the ICS once the Tier 2 process is concluded. So there will be another process to fill the posts that are empty, and then there would be a third process if those posts remained empty. So, Nicholas, I hope that's comprehensive and not too lengthy, but provides you with the board a view of the current highlights.
Okay, thank you, David. I'm hoping everybody can hear me. Sorry, I just pressed the wrong button. I just wanted to add that transformational drive and attention to detail, as well as linkage with all of our strategic partners, has been really so much. Diane has been part of that process. And I can't think of anybody better to have done that. I think what's remarkable, Diane, and I know I'm going to embarrass you now, is the way in which you have led your team professionally throughout the time of your role, and also your role as Deputy Chief Exec, where we have seen so much transformation in the system. So many people in the system are going to be very, very sad to see you go. I have personally learnt so much from you and have thoroughly enjoyed the time of working with you. Your laughter and good humour, your ability to lead and transform a team with such loyalty is absolutely phenomenal. And whoever actually has the benefit of working with you in the future are going to be very, very lucky indeed. So I just wanted to say many thanks, and I just want to lead a little round of applause here, because I think you've been absolutely, truly amazing. Okay. Okay. I know that's tough, Diane, but we needed to say it. Diane, do you want to say anything?
No, I'm not going to say much, because I'm
No.
struggling slightly, but I just want to say thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure working in Herts Valleys, and I think the thing I'm most proud of is how much we value people and their health and well-being. So if I leave one message with this board, don't let that go. You know, that if you win the hearts and minds of your staff, then they deliver for you, and that's been our ethos all along. Just hang on to that bit. But thank you.
Thank you. I think there's a few people would like to speak. Alison and Thelma, I can see with their hands up.
Sorry, let Thelma go first. Mine's a question about the report.
Oh, okay.
So let Thelma go first.
Thelma.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Commissioning committee, you have made an immense contribution to the committee. You generally are quiet, but you do ask. When you ask challenging questions in relation to proposals and projects to enable the committee to get the right answers so that we can make the right decision. As a board member, I'd also like to express my thanks and appreciation to you. As I said a few weeks ago, the level of leadership that you showed during the COVID period was remarkable, and that's helped us as members of the governing body, as lay members, to be able to, first of all, be aware of what's going on, but secondly, to be able to make the right decision, but also give us that assurance that we're doing the right thing. My committee will miss you immensely. I'd like to say thank you to you, and I'm really sorry you're going. I think it's a fantastic, it's a loss to NHS, it's a loss to the Commission. But thank you very much, and I wish you well for the future.
Okay, Stuart. Yeah.
And I actually spoke earlier on this week, so I'm not going to elaborate even further. But I just want to put on record the difference that Diane has made to our quality within the system. And if there's one thing that's really uppermost in our minds, is the quality of care, the quality of everything we do for our patients, and let's not lose sight of that. So Diane, I will miss you personally at the Quality Committee. Just recognise and want to make a clear recognition of the difference you've made and the standards that you've brought to us that other CCGs should aspire to. So I wish you well for the future, and we will miss you, even as an Arsenal supporter as well.
Okay. Right. I think Alison's next. Thank you.
Yeah, I will just comment on that, just to say to you, Diane, personally, I absolutely promise I will pursue your values, your agenda, and your commitment to your staff, and pursue your understanding of the fact that if you do win the hearts and minds of the people that you work with, they will go as far as possible. I will stop at nothing to carry that forward for you for as long as I possibly can. So that's my promise to you. And thanks for making that such a core part of our values here at Hearts Valleys. Can I ask a question on the agenda now? It's a little bit along the same line, actually, on the report.
Yeah, please do, Alison.
Note that in HR land, there is a review going to go on about how all of the changes and the redeployment of staff and how that has actually impacted our staff and how they've had to work with a view to learning lessons for next time. I just wondered, it says work is going on. Can I ask for a little bit more detail about when that work is going on, when we expect to hear some results of the review? Because I think it's quite urgent that we understand the impact of all this on our staff and we prepare ourselves for the eventuality that we might have to ask them to go down this road again.
Yeah, Hein, can you come back to us on that, please?
Thanks, Alison. I think that we are currently looking at the way that we have redeployed staff to respond to the pandemic. If we have a second spike and if we need to do that in future again, how do we do that in a more structured and in a more planned manner? And part of that is to pre-create, if for a lack of a better phrase, some roles that we know would be essential to help managing the pandemic, so that we can put the right people at the right level with the right remuneration in those roles, rather than moving people around at very short notice and just hope that everything will be okay. So it gives us a bit of opportunity, and we are looking at some of those roles in terms of what was needed within the system, what was needed within our CCG, and just create an opportunity for us to plan a bit better if we have to do this again.
Yeah, Alison wants to come back. Yeah.
So when can we expect to kind of hear about that? I'm just wondering, you know, when we can expect to hear the results of that.
So we would probably be able to go back to execs and then come back to the board towards the end of the month. So it is imminent that those things will be finalised. And as soon as we've taken the proposal back to execs, then we'll come back to the board.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else that wants to raise a point? Yeah, Trevor and Paul.
I think Rami may have been there first, actually. Rami, do you want to go ahead, or shall I go?
You go, Trevor. I'll follow you.
Okay. Just a few points, really. One is, I think, David, at the beginning, you touched on, the different ways that we've been working as a result of the pandemic. A lot of virtual stations, and I think this has both been in primary and secondary care. We've learned new ways of working, which hopefully are more efficient for the system and more convenient to the public as well. And I think it's probably moved us on a number of years in the way we provide services in the realm of health. And I suppose it's to emphasize the fact that we need to keep hold of some of that change, make sure we communicate it well with the public, so that they understand that we're not trying to distance them, that this is a new and efficient way of working. I think those concepts are something we'll need to work harder on the next few months to make sure that we can continue with this transformation that you've described. So that's my first point. I've got a couple of other ones. Obviously, again, just with the pandemic, the CAMHS workload, and you highlighted some of the issues that young people are facing. And certainly in the past, that's been an issue in terms of capacity and meeting demand. And I suppose just looking for a little assurance on how we're going to monitor that they are going to meet the increasing demand and what we feel their capacity is. So that's the next one. And then the final one is, again, really about returning to normal services. You've alluded to it in terms of, reopening to referrals at West Herts Hospital Trust. I know we've had quite a lot of discussions and we've worked well with them on bringing that agenda forward. It has been difficult for them, but I think we are now on the way. And I suppose really, again, in terms of referral to treatment times, 2-week waits, how we're getting on with the work of assessing their capacity for the future and how we're going to get back to the levels of service that we applied before, but with the new restrictions in place. So those are my 3 points. I don't know if anyone, either we can take them away or whether someone wants to respond to those now. Thanks.
Happy to respond to those, Trevor, now, just to give a high level. So in terms of CAMHS, yesterday we had a long conversation at the Emotional Wellbeing Board from both the head teachers about the best way, including Children's Services who are part of that partnership, about the best way to support children coming back into school. And that at the moment they feel that lots of the mental health conditions are kind of hidden in their arena, because what would have previously happened was, the kids have now been in lockdown, they're suddenly really excited, they've come to school, they're meeting each other, and all of the things that they were worried about is kind of quickly disappeared. But the teachers are really worried that once all of that kind of fades and they're back to the routine and they're back to normal, whatever normal will become for them, which will be different within a school, significantly different in terms of how they're being operated, in terms of the classroom bubbles, how the bubbles will work in those schools. I mean, you're talking a secondary school that could have 1,500 students, having to create new bubbles where people are trying to not work together in the way that they previously were. So we talked yesterday about injecting some resource to support the schools in that transition, and they're going to come up with some plans to support that, because that's where we will see it. But we'll also see that we will also need to be aware of making sure we see the people who are hidden. So you've got your standard ways in which schools would look at people's children's mental health, and they would be potentially children looked after, they would be vulnerable children. They've used the school meals kind of register at times as part of their kind of oversight. This will affect other children whose family members may have lost their jobs, and the economic realities of what's happened. And these will be children that wouldn't normally have been flagged into the system, or the schools wouldn't have been aware of using tools that they would do to kind of pick these children out and find support. So all of that's being planned up as we speak and ready to go over the summer period. And it's going to be challenging because also children's summer camps are closed as they previously were open during the summer. That again affects children's well-being because they're places sometimes for safety as well as well-being and mental health support. So the Emotional Wellbeing Board are on the case in those areas, Trevor, just to give you some assurance, and there is a plan and some investment going in to support that. In terms of your second point and the reality of delivery versus referrals going in and standing up of services, this is the key challenge really, and it will be around how we organise our services across the sites that we have. And we have our 3 sites in Watford, St Albans and Hemel. And actually there is an advantage to having those 3 sites compared to other locations in the country, because now we can have COVID positive, COVID negative and COVID unknown spaces that we can provide support to those individuals who will be wanting to be safe when they get their care and treatment. The numbers are significant, so we know the referrals are significant, but what we need to do is look at the run rate, and the work that's taking place this week and next is the run rate, so we can see how quickly you have to don and doff, what your efficiencies are, and how often you can deliver surgical procedures. And so there's some things you can't do at night. There's some things you can't do 24/7 just because the current legislation prevents you from doing it. But we need to optimise our models to make sure that we get the best people treated And I think we also need to look at quality and safety. At the moment, we have a time-based process that gets people treatment. We probably need an acuity one and a risk-based one that ensures the right people get the right treatment. So they're not the answers yet, but they're the pieces of work that we're doing as a system to come forward. I'm happy for other colleagues to input.
Okay. Okay, I'm quite conscious of time, so I might move on. So it was Rami, sorry, Rami, and then Paul. Yep.
Yeah. I also had a CAMS issue. First is to raise a section of your report, David, noting that we have been successful in our STP at getting a further wave of mental health support teams to go to schools in two in need areas. That's the Watford and Stevenage areas. And what I was hoping is to see that we can actually not wait till this has to be done physically, but that they are actually in place virtually to support the children as they come and as they're waiting to come back. So we can use the summer. That's the one thing that I did not see in the report, which maybe we need to go back and push on. And this other thing that would be really useful here is to actually take full advantage of the input from schools. The schools can work virtually as well as physically. So that would be quite useful there. The second area was cancer. And with cancer, I just wondered whether we could also look, I've got the cancer lead as well, so I'm looking into it, looking at having a much more aligned virtual pathway review between secondary and primary care so that we don't have the glitches that create delays.
Okay. Did you want to come back on those? It's very well made, Rami. No, I think not. I think we'll agree with that. Okay, Paul, I think it's over to you next. Yeah, final before we move on.
Thanks, Nicholas. Just two quick points. David, I think firstly, it would be helpful just to remind the board, to assure the board as to how, as we do the tier 2 recruitment, how we're ensuring that we're not just adding overhead and another level of senior management to the organisation that takes money away from looking after patients. And secondly, on the question of the sort of the virtual work that's been going on, the transformational stuff, I think we do need to make sure that in assuming that that's the new normal and that we won't go back, that we actually have some evidence as to the efficiencies of it. Because it's one thing communicating to the public, but if it's not actually real, they won't believe it. So I think we need to be evidence-led on what have been the efficiencies of virtual consultations versus actually seeing how has it led to better patient outcomes, how is it more efficient for patients, how is it more efficient for GPs. If it is more efficient for GPs, how is that efficiency being reinvested? All that sort of stuff. Same for secondary care. We shouldn't just assume that changing it to doing it virtually is better than seeing people because it has worked for the short term because we've had to do it. Over.
David, do you want to quickly respond to that before we move on to the next item?
Sure, to pick up the first one. The second one.
David, I think am I the only one? You're definitely breaking up.
He was. I thought it was deliberate.
No. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Is that better? I'll look at that. Nice. The tier two in terms of financial efficiency. So I guess to a certain degree, that we're looking at a collective budget now and a senior management team or executive team across the totality of the ICS footprint. And as you know, we are losing people from our system, or they are being moved around. And that in twofold does two things. It changes the dynamic of how the CCG operates as a unit, but also I guess it moves and shifts costs around in a different way than it was done previously. So this CCG will have a different formed executive. So Alka, who is currently our Director of Finance, will go back to being our Deputy Director of Finance, liaising to one Director of Finance, who will be Alan Pond, across the system. And so the budgets will obviously have to shift and drop out in that way. And our view is that we don't create additional bureaucracy on top of it. But I think it's still work in progress, Paul, and it's forming as we speak at the same time as as how the 3 CCGs will want to align on a journey to merge into one CCG, and that's probably the clearest position I can give you at this point in time, other than giving you them, you know. Anthony, did you want to pick up the other point?
Yeah, yeah, Paul, I mean, an absolute valid point. So one of the things that we've all started to do is to actually, the whole point is to actually start building in evaluations. So you'll have seen that, you know, we've started to evaluate the virtual hub hospital project, but within that, across the whole piece, whether that's the care home work, whether that's the outpatient transformation in the acute trust, discharge to assess, all of them, they are now going through a program of evaluations, which will be presented at commissioning exec and at future boards to actually then say, does this work? Is this value for money? Is it actually efficient? What does that actually mean for patients? How is it in terms of quality benefits as well? So all of that piece of work is being discussed through the ICP Directors Group, which will, so that it's multidisciplinary and owned by the partnership as well, and then presented at various committees in the future meetings as well. So we are on it.
Thanks.
Okay. Paul, thank you, Paul. Right, I'm going to move on now. Thank you very much for everybody's contributions on that. So the next is the BAF. Katie, I'm definitely going to have to take this as read just because of time. But of course, one of the major changes in the BAF is actually the impact of COVID. I don't know if you just want to sort of outline some of the major highlights, and this is for approval, please, board.
Yeah, so I will take the paper as read. Just to note that there are a few risks that we've closed because they've merged into other things as things move around. But the thing to really take note of is that we've had to change some of our forecast risk achievements. So the impact of COVID on the length of time it will take us to achieve the effective management of some of those risks has extended into the next year. But it's a realistic approach to assessing this, and we'll just have to keep monitoring it as we go on, as we're not exactly sure what's going to happen. One of the key points that Paul made in his in flagging the audit committee response about the risk management strategy was that more and more, particularly in the current circumstances, we have to be thinking about what are the key risk indicators that things might be going wrong or not going as well as they need to, and what are our contingency plans to deal with that event should it happen. So I'm working closely with risk leads, and particularly people in the recovery management group, to identify exactly how we will know what are the triggers that things either might be heading towards a second peak, or that our recovery plans are just not moving fast enough to prevent harm to patients, etc. So everybody is very much on the case with that, and that's going to be our now focus. And coming to the board in September, the BAF report will pick up on those particular items to outline what some of our contingencies would be, and ask for committee and board input into what else we need to do, essentially. So we're on the case. Just wanted to assure the audit committee and the board. And I think the main thing to note is that the one risk where we've increased the risk score is the biggest unknown at the moment. We don't know the potential harm to people who may not have been coming forward during the pandemic, who might otherwise have gone for treatment. And that's why we've increased that score. Alongside that, we don't yet know exactly how long it will take to treat some people who've now been waiting quite a while. We do have processes in place to monitor and to make sure that people are treated according to acuity, according to urgency, but we still feel like there are some questions we don't know the answers to, and that's why we've increased that score, not because we're not still on the case to watch out for patient safety and quality, but because we recognise that there are still some unknowns and we need to be very alert to those. So I think they're the main points for this report.
Thank you for that really helpful summary. Board, any questions from yourself or points that you'd like to raise? I think I've got Paul's hand up first.
Thanks, Katie. Good to hear about the key risk indicators and contingency plans. I do think there is a risk that when you look at the framework as it stands, that we're looking at a load of red risks that just aren't moving, and that actually, and notwithstanding COVID, it's always been a little bit like that. And that there is a risk that we are just sort of admiring the framework and not actually using it to drive actions. I think the work that Katie's describing will be really helpful, But I also think that at some point we're going to need to be honest about, our risk targets are just simply too optimistic, and we can't manage the risk down to that level. And in that case, we need to decide, well, therefore, what do we do about it? And I'm not sure we've ever had that discussion on some of these things, because we can't manage all these risks as a body. Some of these risks belong to the wider system, and they need to be escalated. And part of it may be something that, as the ICS develops, that it takes on more ownership of the risk for the total health economy in Hertfordshire, so that they get managed on a system-wide basis. I think so there's lots and lots to move on with this. But I just think we need to be careful that we don't, because we run out of time on risk every time pretty well, look at it and go, yeah, okay, move on. Because it's not a pretty picture. It's all red and amber. And they're not moving much. Over.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
I just wanted to note that at the chairs and chief executives meeting of the ICS the other day, it was flagged as a key first focus, and I've already, along with the other two governance leads, had a message from Jane Halpin impressing on us the need to move forwards with how are we going to get the joint governance arrangements, how are we going to establish a joint risk management strategy, etc. And so that is at the forefront of people's minds, that actually one of the answers to those risks that we can't manage as a single organisation is going to be the greater collaboration and across the system to find new ways of dealing with things that we've been stuck on for several years, and so have all our colleagues across the system. So I think there's the impetus there to take this forward, and this is the time where we're looking at having those conversations with ICS partners and really trying to get some sort of concrete plans in place that say, how can we join together our efforts to make some movement?
Yeah, Thelma, I think you were going to come in, yes.
Yeah, this is just a question on health inequalities and reduction of health inequalities. Which at the moment, the current risk score looks to me like orange. My question also takes on board the fact that Paul said, we will not be able to manage all the risks, some of the risks are shared, but does what we say take on board the unusually high impact of COVID-19 on BAME groups and probably other groups as well, in terms of our plans and what we say here? Because ultimately, if something goes seriously wrong, I mean, we are the CCG, there are actions that, one, we should take in terms of our overall responsibility for health inequalities to manage that risk, and also making sure others do it. So my question is, does what we say here address that point? I mean, I'm looking at the assurance and I can't see anything here on BAME, but maybe I'm not reading it right. And as I said some time ago, the Equality and Human Rights Commission had said that, one, they were going to do an investigation into, this is the older people, the care team. I'm sure the next, because of the issues that's been going on with BAME, and also government have appointed a body to look into it, I'm sure the next thing they will be looking at would be how NHS locally address those points. So I think we should be in the front foot rather than the back foot.
I think that's a really strong but important challenge there, Thelma. And I think, Katie, that's something that we also, apart from our own responsibilities as a statutory organisation at the moment, need to be working very closely with the other two CCGs and the ICS system. It needs to be articulated and mitigated against more clearly than we have so far. So I'm not sure how we take that away in terms of an action. That's the bit I'm sort of questioning. Katie, have you got some initial thoughts?
Well, I'll discuss with Avni and her colleagues about how we articulate that. Avni might want to say something in a minute because it's her team mainly who report to me on that health inequalities risk. But I think the main thing to note is that both the long-term plan and the ICP plans and priorities going forward are very much focused on reducing health inequalities. And one of the things that we're working with our partners in the ICP is to discuss how we can measure and produce evidence that inequalities are being introduced, and how we can make sure that we're addressing all of those inequalities in whatever form they might be. So I don't know if you want to add anything, Avni.
I think Salma's raised a valid point. Salma, in terms of COVID and BAME, the reason why you're not seeing anything in the health inequality section is because we obviously had a specific COVID risk that was put onto the back when COVID was there. So when you look at the COVID risk under 1.3 and that obviously talks about BAME, but probably not to the extent that in terms of health services and how COVID and BAME has been related. It mainly talks about BAME in terms of our staff. So we do need to take that back and actually reflect that on that, and whether I actually take that and pick that up in the health inequality section or not, because it's not something that we haven't considered, because anything that we are commissioning, especially during the COVID period as well, is we're absolutely mindful that when it comes to diabetes or BAME in terms of the hubs and all of that, how are we actually addressing and reducing some of the inequalities even further wherever possible as well. I just need to probably take that back and see whether we need to put it in here or articulate it in the relative risk of COVID.
Yeah. Thelma?
If I may come back, this is very important because these documents are public documents, and we will all be held to account when central government undertakes its inquiry, which is about to start, and when the EHRC. So it's very important, even if we're thinking about it, that we do have, evidence in writing that we've actually actively considered it, plus also what we're doing, and be able to test that. So yes, there's a statutory duty to reduce health inequalities generally, but during this specific period, we've identified specific issues, and therefore within that overall responsibility, we need to pinpoint it and make sure we're doing something about it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the same issue with the care homes as well. The care homes have been articulated in there. However, the specific on the BAME bit, I will pick that up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Brian, you've made a couple of points. Do you want to come in here?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Good. No. Mine was obviously the benefits of increased IT use, not just in Harts Valley, but across the ICS system, also brings perhaps additional risks in terms of, shall we say, untoward hack or breakdown of the system or whatever it is. And I think Paul's answered that in terms of both data protection and GDPR, and I think risk mitigation here. Whatever we can do to put that on the forefront, so that you can't be accused of not having actually assessed what that risk might be and how we might mitigate it if there's a system breakdown.
Yeah, really, really important points. Kate, did you want to say anything more about the separation, I suppose, of the risks in terms of care homes?
Yeah, I just was thinking that I think there's such, with BAME and care homes, the risk has been highlighted as such an important one, particularly as we do have lots of care homes in Harts Valleys, that maybe we should be looking at them as a separate risk in themselves.
Okay. I mean, Diane wants to come in. Sorry.
I just wanted to say that, as a board, obviously we look at the board assurance framework. So this is our top level strategic risks. So I think there's something about how we take the risk registers that are a lower level, the corporate risk register and the individual directorate risk registers, to the individual committees, and make sure that they are looked at in detail there, because actually some of the detail you're describing, I think, sits in some of those risks at a lower level. So it's how much we escalate into here. So not saying it shouldn't be in here, just saying that actually there's something about other assurance being available in the broader risk register portfolio.
Okay. Thelma wants to come back. Sorry.
Just a quick point, following on from the point that Brian made. There is a new toolkit that's just been published by the ICO in relation to data protection and freedom of information, particularly because of this COVID situation, and asking bodies to use it and also give any feedback. So it may very well be that the information governance person has already received it at the CCG, probably they have, but I just thought the board should know, and I'm happy to forward it to anybody who's interested. And also GPs need to look at it as well, because they need to implement that as well, because you keep a lot of not only personal data, but sensitive personal data. So I'm happy to say it.
Okay, I mean, I think what we're hearing is, with the richness of this discussion, is the challenge that we face in terms of articulating it within our BAF to make sure that our individual committee structures are also having rich conversations and challenging areas where we need greater clarity. And I think on another level, we've also got the ICS and the discussion with the other two CCGs. Sorry, Paul, you wanted to come back on something, sorry.
I just wanted to say, I think it's important that on the various things that we've been discussing, because a lot of things have happened quickly, that there is a good process, not just to circle back on benefits and stuff, which we talked about earlier, but also about the accompanying controls and mitigations that go with those. And it cuts across a lot of the things that we've talked about, such information technology and all the other stuff that's emerged as a result of COVID. But we do need to make sure that what we've done in a hurry, we can now go back and just tidy up and make sure that things actually, there aren't any holes in it. Over.
Yeah. Okay. No, Paul, point well made. David, I'm sure you'll take that through as MD in terms of the discussion with our directorates and with the individual committee chairs. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Can confirm that.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much for that, Katie. We now move on to our values behaviours, and apologies that we're running a little bit late now, Delphine. Delphine, I did see you earlier, so hopefully you're going to appear in a moment. This is actually an attachment for approval. I am going to take it as read, but Delphine, perhaps you have some. Welcome, Delphine. Yeah. Okay. Perhaps you can just talk us through just some of the most important sort of points of this refreshment. This was quite a lot of work that was done actually last year and in the run up to COVID, correct?
Yes, it was actually. Thanks very much. Hi, colleagues. Yes, we did a couple of workshops for staff back in September, and then went through the feedback session with our SIG, and then SLT and execs. And so the final product is now here with board for approval. The main thing that we did was to refresh the behaviors. So the values themselves haven't changed. We've just refreshed the behaviors based on our current new ways of working and all of that, just making sure that it's in the new century, if you like, because they were done way back in 2013. So we've managed to refresh them, and everyone is kind of happy with it at the moment. So we're here with board, and then after board has done it, we approved it, we'll use it with our appraisals and our new values-based recruitments.
Okay, thank you, Delphine. I've already got some questions. I think I've got Stuart and Paul to start with. Yeah, Stuart.
Okay, I have to say I don't find them actually really getting to me as a real sense of urgency behind this. I mean, if I look at, and I don't know why we use the word quite so much, if I look at having, we use positive twice. In the empowering, we use positive twice, and I'm not sure what positive really means for us. We've got 20 months left as a CCG. We've got a reputation that we have established as an organisation that achieves things, does things. And when we talk about focusing on quality and making a positive difference, being dynamic and positive, really doesn't do much for me. Leading by example with energy, motivation and drive. I once worked for an organisation where the MD came in and said, drive is not sufficient. What I want to see is a burning sense of urgency here. And I think that's always been a criticism of mine, how long things take in the NHS to deliver. So I would like to see a little bit more ambition here, that we've proved in the last few months how we can do things when we need to, do things with a sense of urgency, make things happen quickly. And I don't get the message from this that really is an organisation that is driving things with change, with a sense of urgency. So, and I'm not sure why we use the word positive quite so much and what it does for me in terms of what its meaning is.
Okay, let's just hit the points and then we'll perhaps come back to Delphine. Paul. And then Alison,
So
I can see your hand up.
I had a couple of points. I mean, I thought there were a few words that there's probably a few redundant words in there, because I think I picked up actively being used, dotted around as well. But I mean, that's kind of the way it goes. I did think that the point about learning from errors is a bit negative. I think we should be thinking about learning from experience, and positive and negative experience. So we don't just want people to think about learning from errors, which is a big thing in the NHS. They're always learning from errors, and then about 2 years later, they learn the same error over again. We need to learn properly from experience, not only our own, but also from outside, so that we don't keep reinventing the wheel as well, which is really important when there's so many bodies going through the same sort of change as us, and some are ahead in the process. So I think people need to move away from the negative context of errors and think about, no, it's broader than that. Experience, there's positive and negative there. But the second point I want to make, I mean, I had something similar to Stuart on the urgency thing, but I mean, I think there just needs to be a point in there that says that we do what we say we're going to do, or we deliver on our commitments, or something like that, because the rest of it is they're all good things, but at the end of the day, one of our values needs to be that we actually deliver, that we're an organisation that does what it says it's going to do. I think that's really important to me, I think. And the only other challenge I think I'd put back, and I think this is always an issue with these sorts of things, is it's really difficult to make these unique, because I think an awful lot of these you could slap them on pretty well any organisation, and people would look at them and go, yeah, that sounds about right. And therefore, I think the challenge might be, how do you actually, what are we going to do for people to enable them to behave in this way that we want them to behave? What training do people actually need? Because otherwise it's going to be a nasty shot come appraisal time, both for managers and for the workers, because managers won't know how to appraise against these criteria, or else they'll all do it differently, and workers won't know what's actually expected of them, because some of these are a bit sort of amorphous.
Okay. I think Alison, then Thelma, then David.
I share with Paul the feeling that we should also be learning from our successes and our general experiences as well as failures. I think these values and behaviours are the underpinning things that will help us to deliver with the burning sense of urgency that Stuart describes. Without some real reinforcement of these values and behaviours, without actually finding a way to make sure we are behaving in the workplace in a way that actually supports these values and delivers them, the rest of it will go by the way. An organisation is only its people. And its people, when they are being required to go the extra mile and work harder, need to be supported with positive values and behaviours. And without that, we can have as much sense of urgency as we like. We will not deliver in the way that we want to deliver. We have to look after our people in order to pursue the agenda that Stuart quite rightly focuses on and Paul focuses on. These are really the things that must drive us, but we can't get there without these behaviours and without these values.
Okay, Thelma, I think it was Thelma, David and Hein.
Yes, I agree entirely with what Alison has just said. I actually find it enlightening, and I am going to use it to look at the values of my own organisation. We don't need a value that says we should deliver. We're here to deliver. These are the values, as Alison says, that underpins what we do. And I want to be positive, and I'd like to see more positive. It means something to many people. We've got energizing, burning energy, whatever the terminology is. In my opinion, it's not necessary to be there. We're actively with burning. We don't need to have it as our value. So I'm very happy with it as it is.
Okay.
And thank you to whoever did it.
Yeah, we'll come back to that in a minute, actually. Yeah, David.
So I take some of the language points from Stuart and Paul, but my belief is that this is about culture, organisation, not about strategy. So we deliver on our strategies, deliver on our delivery points. But we all know, and I do this culture eat strategy for breakfast. You can have burning platforms, you can have need for urgency. If you aren't bringing people along with you, they just won't do it, and they'll stand down. And we've seen that during the COVID period. You know, it has taken an awful amount of time and effort from this executive team to get culture on for staff in the organisation to follow the lead, to go into places like hot hubs where they feel an impending sense of danger, to actually go and join a professional set of service providers who completely work in a different and an alien way to them, and just offer themselves as support. And you only get that by creating the right culture. The strategy will drive the work. The strategy will do that. We always have been strong with that, and I believe in that. But this is for our staff, and this is for them to understand that if someone's not working and living by those values, there's a conversation to be had with their peers, their manager, and everybody else to keep the ship afloat. And not more over the last 3 months have I discovered that this is about as probably the most important thing that we need to do. Bear in mind that we might change some of the language. These are really important, and that's my view.
Okay, thank you. Hein was there. He seems to have dropped off.
He's there. He's muted.
All right. Hein, are you going to come back in? Looks like not. Juliet, I can see your hand up while we're waiting for Hein. You're on mute still. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm unmuted now. Yes, thank you very much. I think this is a really interesting debate, and I think what I really like is the fact that people are actually engaging in this. So it's really easy with a series of words that aren't unique. You're absolutely right, Paul. I don't think they have to be unique, but it's really great that people are actually reading this and think it's important. So I take real comfort from that, actually. I think in terms of, Stuart, your comment about urgency, actually not everything is urgent. So I think actually, I'm not sure that I would want to see urgent as a thread throughout. I think there is something that is quite valuable about people doing what they say they're going to do. So if there's a way that we can play around with the wording to bring some of that in, and I think, Paul, you mentioned about delivering on commitment, I think we can absolutely play around with some of the words. Your point about learning from errors, absolutely we should learn from the good things we do as well. But I think the value of saying that is that actually what we're actually saying is it's okay to make mistakes. You know, you do learn from them. Maybe that's a bit of a cliche, but I think being able to say, actually, I didn't do that as well as I should have done, and actually, I'm going to do that better next time I write a report for the board or whatever it is that I do. So I think that we do need to keep that in, but bearing in mind also that obviously we do want to, you know, learn from the positives too. So I think we can do something with the wording. I would just say that in terms of the value of these, the fact that we've had, and there has been a bit of a gap in a few months, but before then, the SLT were engaged, the staff involvement group, we had really, really good conversation with staff involvement group. So in terms of this being used, and I think Alison and others made the point about they're only worthwhile if we actually do something with them. That actually the fact that we had so many people involved in the conversation, and it did take us a bit of time, but it's good because it means those people will actually recognise those words, even if we tweak them a bit. So actually, I'm quite optimistic. I'm quite positive, to use words that Stuart's been complaining a little bit about, but I'm positive actually that this will be a really good move forward for us.
Okay, Hein. Yeah.
My mic didn't want to unmute, so my computer didn't want me to speak. I think I don't want to add anything other than just saying that colleagues need to just bear in mind that these values were created in 2013. They formed the bedrock of the focus of the culture and the climate of the CCG. And as Diane and Alison have spoken about the strong people focus in the CCG, it is based on these values that we have established. A lot of work has gone in to create them when the CCG was established. And I think people are rightfully quite protective of these values. The behaviors that we defined in here flown, no, is that the right word, was created out of the accountability framework. So the SLT, the staff involvement group, the people of the CCG will absolutely recognize this and is very protective of these values. It is fair to say that in the next 18 months, it is likely that we will have to evaluate these values together with West Essex and Eastern North Hearts values to understand how do we ensure that the culture and the climate for the CCGs moving forward is right for our patients and for our people. But I think we have spent a huge amount of energy and time on taking people with us on the journey with us. Delphine and the staff involvement group have done a lot of engagement. And whilst we can tweak a word here or there, I think that my appeal to the board is to support the values as they stand, because we will have to revisit them in the next 18 months in any event.
Yeah, can I just, before I just get sort of wind this one up, is to say that of course it's not only about the culture of the merging CCGs, it'll also be about the culture of our own individual ICP and of course the ICS. So in many ways this culture, these values are going to have to find places in discussions in quite a number of different pots, and I think particularly with us being such a West Hertfordshire focus, that ICP discussion is going to be absolutely crucial. Absolutely crucial. And I would like, to put on record, Delphine, the great work that you've done, the great work that the staff groups have done. This is so integral into the discussions. I dial in now, as some of you do now, into the staff briefings. This really comes over loud and clear to me in the way that people speak. So I think people are living and breathing it. And I would say urgency is a drive for transformation. And that is something that we will want to continue to do in the future. So I'm seeking sort of board approval for this now. So if you can just raise your hands if you're in approval. Yeah. Anybody that wishes to abstain or vote differently? Anybody that wishes to abstain or vote differently? No. Sorry, Paul, you want to abstain, do you?
Yeah, no, if they're amended in the way that Juliet was describing, I'd be quite content.
Okay. So
I don't think that just because, I appreciate the staff have done an awful lot of work on these, and I think it's great, but I don't think that's a reason for the board to approve them without any modification, because the board's role is not just to accept what the staff come up with. Otherwise, we would have no purpose to be here.
Okay, so I think we're in essence approving, but we are actually asking for perhaps some nuances in terms of amendments. Is that going to be possible, Delphine, Juliet, and Hein? I'm just asking you. Yeah, I'm getting nods. So I think with that caveat, yeah, I think we are approving, and Paul's comments are duly noted. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, we're moving well behind now. So we now move on to a verbal update on the West Herts Trust outline business case. David.
Thanks, Nicholas. So this really is just a continuation from the previous conversations that we've had. And today is just a verbal update because work has only just really in terms of the engagement process that's taken place over the last month. As we know, NHS England are supportive of us moving forward with the outline business case. Just to remind people, there is a envelope of money that's been put into a formal letter that now is available to work on, and the West Herts Hospital Trust and also the CCG have already begun that engagement. There is lots and lots of work to continue to be done, and it's fair to say that Jane Halpin and our regional keen for these capital projects to be delivered on and be delivered on by 2025. So significant for the centre to do that and move us in the right direction. We've had a board-to-board already, and we'll continue to do that with West Herts Trust. That's the next steps that we'll be taking going forward. I wanted to hand up to Juliet, who's going to talk about the recent work around the engagement process, because that's the real update for today's session. Juliet.
Yes, can you hear me? Okay, so just to say that, and I know some people on this call will be involved in this, but we have done the engagement around the OBC has been a little bit different this time from how it was with the SOC. Partly that's because we've had to do things online, but I think in any case there are some other sort of qualitative differences. So we set up a stakeholder reference group and also a professional reference group, the latter being a group of clinicians and other staff. And essentially the role of those groups, in particular the stakeholder reference group, is about informing the development of the OBC, both in terms of the detailed design of hospital facilities and also when we get to clinical pathways. So I suppose really the role is about bringing people's experience and views into the appraisal process, and that's the experience of people who use services and stakeholders generally who have an interest in what the trust and what the CCG are doing. So the boards, both boards will want to have a really good understanding of the range of stakeholder views. So that's a kind of a really key way that we're developing that. And in terms of how we got to the group that we've got to in terms of the stakeholder reference group, and we've got, I think now 72 members, which I think is a really good number. We haven't put we haven't shut the door on that. So if other people want to get involved, then even though they won't have been through the introductory session, if you like, we're very happy to bring them on board. But we did use some community networks and our sort of wide-ranging networks to get involvement. And in fact, all the expressions of interest we received, everybody has been able to join, which is really great. We are going to try and look at how we can increase the diversity, and we've got some plans in place for that. The first stage in the OBC process, and that's obviously laid down by government and regulators, is that we need to agree the investment objectives and the essential criteria to assess the options. So that was the first task of the stakeholder reference group, and they met a couple of times at the end of June to review the draft investment objectives, the draft essential criteria, which are also known as critical success factors. So those recordings are online, by the way, so anybody can have a look at those. So there were a series of questions that then those members were asked to respond to, and they had to respond the following week. So some of them were yes and no questions, and then they had a sort of a place where they could write other suggestions about investment objectives. There's a huge amount of material actually that's gathered through that process, and all of that is going, forming part of a feedback report that's going to Programme Board in August. So other sessions, and for earlier this week, so since we put these papers together and the information, we've had another session, in fact 2 earlier this week. I couldn't attend, but on digital transformation. So actually connects very well with some comments made earlier by Trevor and I think by Paul. And we're not just asking the stakeholder reference group for their feedback about digital transformation and how we can use technology to improve the experience of patients, but actually we've gone much wider than the stakeholder reference group with a wide-ranging survey that we are sending out during this week. So I think that's going to be really, really important, and I think there's a lot of information we can gather through that. Other issues that the stakeholder reference group will look at, the clinical strategy, they'll be looking at site surveys that are being conducted as part of the OBC, and the long list appraisal. So there's a lot of work. It's very task-based, which means that it's kind of, I think, really concrete. I think the other thing just to say is that what we obviously don't want to do is just confine engagement on this to those groups, even though it's actually a reasonably large group of people. So a newsletter has been launched. The first one went out last week, and we are going to be doing more social media. So that's going to be targeted so that we do actually make sure we bring in groups of people who we haven't perhaps had we haven't heard from enough of previously. And there are some new website pages being developed. So if you haven't had a look at those, look at the Trust site, look at our site, and you can see a link to all the new information that's on there, including developing frequently asked questions, because of course we're getting quite a lot of correspondence about this as well. So, you know, quite an exciting, quite an intense period of engagement that started sort of a few weeks ago.
Thank you, Juliet. Can I just ask quickly, in terms of engagement from children and young people, those with learning disabilities, the BAME communities, are those areas where we still need to strengthen involvement?
Yes, I think that's right. So one of the things we are doing, as I say, with social media is that we're actually going to be using the way that you can with social media to target particular groups. And so we have actually got a reasonable spread in the stakeholder reference group. We don't think it's enough, and I think there's always an issue about children and young people. So there is definitely more we can do on that, and we have the support of the diversity officer at the trust, who's actually been really heavily involved in this, and that's been really helpful.
Thank you. Any other points from the board? Yeah, I've got Jill, I've got John. Yep.
I'm involved in the stakeholder reference group, and I'd like to say how positive a move I think this has been, and the fact that you've got quite a range of people involved who perhaps haven't been before is a really positive thing. I would say, though, that I do think we need to work more on getting a greater range of people involved in terms of age group and in terms of different users of the services. But I would like to think that we would be able to in future think about a meeting which would involve people who are interested but perhaps don't want to be involved in the sense of having to do anything. So if it would be possible to publicise a sort of big meeting, as we've had big meetings in the past where people have come, but we could try and provide for those people by having something online where people are not signing up to do anything, because I think sometimes that could put people off, but to actually reach our wider population in a much more positive way.
Okay, thank you. John, then Kate.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good. I fully support what Juliet and Jill said. I think it's vital to widen the range of people on the strategic reference group. They're the archetypical sort of white middle class, quite elderly people. And I took part, as I think Jill did, on Tuesday evening in one on the use of IT or consultancy, etc. But the number of people there was extremely small, 23 or 24, as I noted down. And I think any statistical or policy conclusions based on such a demographic with such a small number of people taking part would not really bear too much confidence. I think widening out the number of people and the demographic is absolutely vital. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Kate.
I just wanted to ask Juliet whether we've managed to get a good spread of people from all 4 localities of Herts Valleys. I certainly have attended meetings in the past in our locality, because I think quite a few people use the Royal Free Trust. The meetings have been much less well attended than they had been in other localities. So I just wanted to ask that question and see whether there was anything we could do to make sure that all 4 localities were equally represented.
So on that question, actually, in terms of locality, we've got a pretty decent spread, actually. I mean, I think what, of course, we don't know, that's the number, that's the 72 people who've signed up. So what I don't know, I don't know offhand, and I'm very happy to come back to you on, is in terms of the engagement with the sessions, how many have come from the Herts Valleys locality. But in terms of actual numbers on that group, actually, it's pretty well shared out between the 4. So that's a good point. But I will come back on more detail. John, your point about the digital transformation issue. So there are actually 2 sessions this week. So there was one on, I think one on Monday and one on Tuesday evening, or both on Tuesday. So the number who attended your session, they will have been at least, I think, double that because of the other sessions. But I completely agree. That doesn't mean that we know what everybody thinks, which is why what we agreed last week with the Trust was that actually would broaden out the issue of asking people about use of technology and how we can do that. And that's why that's going much, much wider than the stakeholder reference group. And I think it's a conversation that isn't just going to be done and dusted during this survey, during that particular task for the stakeholder reference group. It's a much, much bigger issue, as we've talked about before. So I completely agree with you. And yes, just absolutely, Jill, broadening it out, which is our intention. I think that's absolutely right.
Right. Stuart, did you have a quick point? So I wasn't quite sure if you had your hand up or not. No, you didn't. No. Okay. Time's moving on. And this was obviously an update. So thank you very much for the comments, and we look forward to working and hearing the results of that consultation as it moves on. So thank you very much, everybody. Right, apologies now to Miranda. We're running late and we're eating into our break, but restarting referrals for specialist fertility treatments, which is for approval. Miranda, a very clear document which clearly lays out the pause and then the restart. So over to you, Miranda.
Oh, there's not a huge amount to say, Nicholas, other than nationally, all the specialist fertility providers have opened up to their private patients and now to their NHS patients. We had said that we would review it in light of infection rate and national guidance at the end of July, which is now. So I'm looking for approval that we restart specialist fertility treatment. There are a number of couples that have had their treatment on pause during this period. So they're all ready to go. And so I would like to have a recommendation that we support and reintroduce funding for specialist fertility treatment. I don't know if anyone's got any questions.
Yeah, Jill, to start with.
Could I just say that because this is always of such great public interest and concern, can we make sure that we do communicate with the public about any decision that is taken and exactly what it will mean for families, because this is something that people will be anxious about as they've seen the clock ticking during the time it hasn't been able to take place. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, John?
I think it's also a very important issue of public relations for the CCG, that the public's kept fully informed, because when the fertility treatment was ratcheted back on a few years ago, there was quite a storm in the local papers and some people really got hot under the collar. Thank you.
Lynn, did you have your hand up? No. Anybody else that wants to make a comment? Yeah, Paul.
Just to say, I mean, I support the proposal. We just need to clean up the front sheet though, so that we do actually fill in the boxes on EQIAs and DPIAs and all that sort of stuff. So that if they're not required, they're not required. But let's say so, rather than just leave it blank, because otherwise it looks like we haven't done the job properly on them, which I'm sure we have. So if we could just clean up the face sheets on these, and there's a few other papers in the deck, so I thought I'd just mention it once. So Miranda's paper was the lucky one that got the mention.
Okay. So can I just be clear about, if the board is going to approve, hopefully in a moment, then how we will communicate, Miranda?
So a letter will go out, is already drafted to go out to all our providers of gynae services, so the ones making the referrals, and also a letter to our specialist fertility providers to let them know they can start accepting referrals. And just to reiterate the process, that they do need a funding number in order to accept that referral. And I've already spoken to the community gynae team, so they know that this is on the horizon, and they have a number of couples already on their books that have been held during this period, and they will contact them. They will need to come back in and have their blood tests, because these need to be done with 6 weeks of starting their treatment. So they will all be communicated. Our provider has a list of all these individuals, and they'll be contacted one by one. People already on their fertility journey, fertility, that will carry on as normal. So it wasn't that we were stopping funding. It's simply we nationally we took the view that the risk of carry on treatment was too high to bring them into a clinical setting, and we didn't know the impact of the infection on the fetus. So hence why funding was put on pause for this reason. So that will be communicated. The policy and EQIA are all on our website for anyone to access.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. Okay, is there any other questions before I move to ask you to approve? I'm not getting any. Okay, so do I have the board's approval? Yep. Anybody that wishes to say differently? No. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you, Miranda, and we'll look forward to getting that publicity out. Okay, we're going to take literally a 10-minute break, and we'll reconvene at 11:20. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to kick off again. We're a bit up against it in terms of time, so Diane is there. Thank you. So it's now over to item 12 to recommence, which is a joint quality and performance report, which is attached for discussion and assurance. Diane.
Okay, thank you. So, so the paper that you've got in your pack is the paper that was presented to the June Quality and Performance Committee. So actually, I think the updates that were in David's report and also the narrative against our sort of constitutional targets within the BAF are much more up to date than the report you're going to, or that you've been looking at. So I don't propose going through this pack. We're on the cusp of producing the next one for the Quality and Performance Committee on the 6th of August, which will start to build more information into it. I suppose what I just wanted to say was that, you know, obviously we had paused on the Quality and the Performance Committee during COVID, and we're just providing you with the updates around the IMT and the quality and performance issues that were coming out through the management of COVID. And this, the Quality and Performance Committee got stood up 2 months ago in a very potted way, I suppose, in a combined way. And I suppose what I'd just like to say to the board is that, you know, what you've got is a joint quality and performance report, which was always the aim. As you know, I took on performance when I took on the Deputy CEO role, and actually we've been working towards how do you pull performance and quality together, because actually the line just doesn't draw nicely between the two because both have an impact on each other. So one of the things that I've proposed, although I won't be at the meeting, is that there's a discussion at the Quality and Performance Committee on the 6th of August about what does this look like in the future. And that will be slightly complicated by the joint executive structure being performance separate from quality. But I think I would just like to say to the board to just consider how effectively it works to have performance and quality talked about in the round, and to not lose some of those benefits that have been gained through that. I'm not going to talk about the detail in there because, as I say, I think it's, you know, you can read it for yourself, and also the discussions that we've had, particularly around cancer, RTT, referral rates have all been the key things that I would have picked up as part of this report. And for me, particularly aligned with the discussion around the BAF, you know, it will take time to recover, and those referral numbers are huge. And so I think for the Quality Committee particularly, we need to keep banging on about the harm and the potential harm, and how do we find those people again that should have been in our system all along. So I think, you know, performance is one thing to get those referrals through, but it's that clinical harm. And it goes beyond that because it's experience as well. And, you know, we're starting to see the complaints come through of the delays. People were very patient with us when we were in a pandemic. People think it's over, and we all know it isn't. But, you know, that's going to start kicking as well. So the whole patient experience and quality and harm of what COVID has done to the system and is, I think, where we need to make sure that we maintain our focus whilst we try and stand it all back up again. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Okay, over to the board. Yeah, Stuart to start with, please. Then Paul.
Just building on what Diane has just said, I've already had a conversation with Claire Malloy, who will be taking over the role of Diane for now until we sort out how we liaise with the new Director of Nursing. So clearly we have lost time, we've lost ground in terms of our focus on quality. And I know that was a concern to some of the board members when we did the board assessment individually a few months ago. But I think in terms of what Diana is saying, that the link between quality and performance is strong, and that's how we should be dealing with it in future. But in terms of current information, I hope that by the time we get to the August meeting, we are much more up to date and much more focused on current issues rather than the period of time where we had little data coming through.
Thank you. Okay, yeah. Paul, I think, was next. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I sort of endorse that. I mean, I think we've had many performance committees where I've rocked up and said, well, what about so and so, and they told me, probably honestly, that it was discussed already in quality committee, because the issues do just cross over. So I think it's quite a natural way for it to go. The only thing I was wondering, actually, also to ask Diane about on reflection, is looking at all the data we do look at. Typically on the performance report, it's always after the event stuff. Is there more that we could do to look at, again, to look at some of the early warning indicators of where performance is going to go? And for instance, is there something in primary care that's an indicator of what's going to happen in secondary care that we should see more of? I don't know the answer, but it seems to me that we're always looking at what's happened rather than what's going to happen.
Paul, I think that's Diane. Do you want to come back on that first before I was going to say something?
I absolutely agree, Paul. It's quite frustrating, actually, that often the data you're looking at is very old, and that's been so obvious, particularly around COVID, because actually we stopped seeing any data. So now we're looking at things that are pre-COVID and just not real to us anymore. I mean, I think what we've been driving, and I know you've been pushing hard on it, and hopefully it's starting to come through, is that actually the narrative and everything that we report to those committees must be the here and now and the next steps, and and that horizon scanning that you're talking about. I think it's very difficult. We can't say that we will start looking at data that's more up to date, because we must look at validated data. But what we can always bring is what we know about the here and now, and you know, that's been the push all along. So I think, you know, people understand that, and your challenge has really put that in people's minds.
I was just wondering if there's data that's here and now, or even validated, but further up the chain, if you like, that we know translates into stuff out in provider land. It may not be an exact correlation, but stuff that gives us an indication of direction of travel. Something to think about, maybe. I don't know.
Well, I think there's some learning from COVID, because we've done a lot more forward thinking in terms of modelling for COVID, and what would triggers look like that would alert us to COVID going again. And I think there's probably quite a lot to learn from that you could adapt for what should you be looking for to know that things are going on. So I think that's a valid point.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things, Paul, in answer to your point in general practice that I think many of us are seeing is the complexity of the cases. And that's because people have held off from making either appointments with a GP or are in that sort of waiting time before they can actually be seen. And I think that the length of the average GP consultation is maybe not a bad indicator of the sort of the possible tsunami of demand that is going to come afterwards. And I think that is, you know, it's very difficult to quantify, but it's not just about the number of consultations, it's actually the number of items and complexity within it. But my GP colleagues might want to expand or not on that, I don't know, but yeah, David?
I think Dive really raised a valid point in the modelling work. So as we're moving into a world where we're going to have to preempt, model what the future might look like, we're going to have to use intelligence instead of the data that we've historically had. I think that the move to block contracts, the ICP working, will mean that those staff who were previously used at just check and challenge against the trusts and to do the validation will probably be retrained and used as skills in terms of modelling to go forward and to work in a different way, because half of that resource isn't required anymore in terms of doing that check and challenge in the same way. So I think we're going to see some change, but I completely agree that we need to move to that bit where we have the intelligence on the word on the street that's combined with the historical data, because unfortunately as a CCG our statutory responsibility is to look at that data. So as much as it's pointless 3 months gone, it's still something we have to do, but we probably want to just tip it a little bit further to the other side and start looking at future modelling and as we said, what's happening now.
Okay, sorry Stuart, did you have your hand up again?
I mean, there's the balance between the data that is validated, that goes into performance reports and legislated to do. But if you sitting on the committee, you would see people like Kate who deliver this report, who's delivering on this is what we found last week or at a meeting we had last week. So as far as that goes, we do get sort of a more forward-looking rather than just relying on data that's 3 months old. But that is still the frustration of the NHS. Lack of urgency, maybe.
Yeah, Rami. Yeah, Rami.
I've just unmuted myself. I think my main concern with all quality and performance is the fact that we are moving into a much more time-consuming healthcare provision, be it secondary care, be it community care, being it primary care. As a primary care physician, I find it it's going to be a great challenge to see a patient in 10 minutes. Now, if I've got to do all the cleaning, all the gown, all the donning and doffing, and working through it all, and using a lot more remote work, which also is time efficient for the patient not coming here. It's much more time consuming for the consultation in terms of doing that. Similarly, my colleagues in secondary care are having to do lots more of the virtual consultations, which, although they seem very good news, they are more time consuming. So I think that I'm just worried that both our performance is a struggle, and if you take quality in terms of what you achieve per consultation, that again will struggle.
Yeah, really, really good points. The efficiency of the health service is certainly well below 50%, if not maybe more in the 20s to 30% at the moment. Any other points before we move on? Diane, I just want to say once again to you and to your team for the production of that and the clarity of the reporting. So thank you very much. Okay, next item is the finance report. Over to Elka. This is for assurance. Elka.
Thank you, Nicholas. The report has been to Finance Committee. So this is reporting our position at month 2 at the end of May. And just as a reminder to committee, we're working in a different financial framework than we would normally work to. So this the allocation that we're working to is not a published allocation. It is an allocation that has been worked up by NHS England to manage during the COVID period. And within it are a couple of methodology errors around mental health, and hence we are reporting quite a notable surplus because there is a duplicate budget that was allocated around mental health. That surplus will be clawed back by NHS England. That's part of the regime. That will be in effect break even. Most other organisations require a top-up to manage COVID costs, but we have a surplus due to the budget error duplication of mental health spend. So at month 2, we are 3.9 million surplus that will be recovered by NHS England to ensure that we are breaking even. The points to note. Mental health spend, we are planning to, we fully intend to, and we don't envisage any particular difficulties around meeting our mental health investment standard, but due to the budget setting methodology, mental health does not appear in the right category. So it looks on the face of the report as though we are not spending our budget on mental health. We are indeed doing that, but it is appearing in a different budget area. We have incurred around about £6 million of COVID expenditure at May. That includes expenditure incurred on behalf of Hertfordshire for the hospital discharge programme, where we lead as a CCG both for East and North Hertfordshire and ourselves through a Section 75 agreement with the council. Other variations that are just worth noting, again due to a budget setting methodology error, the variances within our primary care section of expenditure must not be seen in isolation. They need to be seen in totality for primary care, which means we are actually year-to-date reporting a £1 million overspend. The errors in applying the budget for us for the first 4 months have created a shift between primary care core spend and prescribing spend, which does not actually reflect the budgets as they should be set. So please do not take that performance as a as a true underspend prescribing. In reality, there's probably £500,000 overspend due to volume. This is a result of COVID stockpiling behaviour that we saw towards the end of Q4 and carried on into April. So the true position is probably around about £500,000 overspend, and the remainder of that £1 million overspend is due to COVID expenditure. So this is additional staff going into man the hot hubs and additional staff in primary care having to be put in place to be open during bank holiday weekends, as well as some IT equipment that we put into primary care to facilitate remote working. Our running costs, again, are slightly over the budget set by NHS England. That is common across the region because NHS England reduced the budget below the published allocation. So we are working, in effect, to our published allocation. NHS England have agreed that we can all do that. Therefore, we will continue to show an overspend against running costs. We are confident that we will keep our running costs within our formally published allocation. That's what we are working towards. And you may recall that was already a 20% reduction on the allocation that we received during 1920. So we have and are delivering that reduction in running costs. I don't want to draw anything else out in particular. I think I've made the main points, and the report has gone to committee already. But if there are any specific questions, I am happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, questions. Paul, to start with.
Elke, did you want to mention the last audit committee and the mental health standard issue?
Yes, I can mention that. So we all CCGs undertook a mental health investment standard audit last year for 18-19 expenditure. That audit was undertaken after our normal external audit for 18-19 year-end positions. So it took place during the summer, and it took quite a while to publish due to some issues around data collection and the separation of expenditure on dementia, learning disabilities prescribing. So there was a national a hold on and a review of the audit to understand, what some of these issues were. So the final audit was published, and it is in line with many of our peers. It is a qualified opinion, and it is a qualified opinion due to the inability to separate out some of the expenditure between dementia and other mental health spend. Now, dementia doesn't count towards the mental health investment standard, so therefore by default, because we can't separate it out, we cannot give complete assurance that we have met the mental health investment standard in its truest form. What I would, however, say is that we consistently report the split in the same manner and have done for the last 3 years. And we report consistently. Our reporting is consistently aligned with East and North Herts CCG, who use the same trust, HPFT. So we are confident that our spend has indeed increased, and we're pretty confident that we have a reasonable assurance on having met the standard appropriately. But the split of the data, which is due to coding issues, is something that we will need to address for 2021 to make sure that we can be clearer where the spend has been occurred between dementia and other adult spend.
Okay, Kate.
Our COVID spend that we have currently made, how does it fit with what other CCGs have made in the COVID experience in our local area? And also, how much assurance have we got going forwards that we're going to get reimbursement from this spend?
There isn't any benchmarking that's been undertaken, so we haven't got a comparator. I think that may begin to happen from month 3, 4 onwards. At month 2, it's fair to say that most organisations probably under.
I'm not sure if actually Elke is sound is the problem, or it's me.
Oh, sorry. Can you not hear me?
Can everybody else hear her? Sorry, is it just me?
Yeah.
Fine. Okay, sorry, Elke. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Okay, no, that's fine. So there was some underreporting, Kate, at month 2. So expenditure will be going up at month 3 and 4, and hopefully we will see some benchmarking. I will be updating board separately on the anticipated change to the financial regime and what that might mean around reimbursing COVID expenditure. So there's more detail in the next section on that, as it is draft at the moment, because we haven't had any published guidance on that.
Okay, thank you. Any other points to raise? Yeah, Paul again.
Sorry, so I just wanted to make sure that the board had taken the point on the qualified opinion on the mental health thing, because it is something the board needs to be aware of and be informed of. It is something that appears to have happened to a lot of CCGs because of, as Elke says, because of the data issues. But qualified opinions from accountants is never desirable. So we just need to understand the actual context of it, and at some stage it will be in the public domain, and we need to understand actually that we have been spending what we're supposed to spend on mental health, and communicate it that way. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah, we need to have a great clarity on our mental health spend, full stop. And I think that is even more pertinent when we move into the potential for a mental health ICP across Hertfordshire. So it's in everybody's interests to make sure that we can clarify that and invest the maximum possible in mental health provision, which is presumably why the audit is there to stimulate that discussion and movement. Okay, any other points? Okay, that was for assurance. So unless there's any other burning points, I'm going to move on now to item 14, Juliet, the communications and engagement report, which is extensive, and perhaps we probably thought about realising just how much communications and engagement there have been through COVID. So over to you.
Yeah, so this is actually a cut down version. The original version was just almost twice as long as this. So I'm sorry it is still a bit long, but absolutely, I think that we have just been, we've been very busy, I know, as all colleagues have. So really just what I wanted to do was give you a flavour for the kind of work we've done. And obviously our work around the pandemic was very intense, and really we reconfigured the work of the team very quickly in order to respond to what was going on in terms of the pandemic. And really the only thing that we did that wasn't directly related to managing COVID was around the hostel redevelopment, which I know I've already talked about. So really just to say a couple of things, I suppose, about the report, which I've seen you've read, even though it is rather long. Just to mention the PPI committee, so to say that we did actually want to, although committees were stood down, we did want to keep in touch with PPI committee members. So we did have a couple of informal sessions. We did that by teleconference, and then we did a WebEx sort of tryout ahead of the formal meeting. I thought it was, I really appreciated having that contact with members of the public. And what we tried to do was just to give an update on what was going on, because we didn't kind of want to lose contact for months on end, and I found that really helpful. Maybe also just to say that around staff, so obviously we did a huge amount of work with staff. We really needed to keep them on board, and given that everybody was working from home, that was really important. We've had the twice weekly staff webinars instead of the monthly. We've done the very frequent written updates, and also staff involvement groups. So again, whilst things were stood down, we decided actually we did want to bring the group together informally, but actually they made hugely constructive contributions to how we were doing things and the kind of conversations we were having at exec about managing the organisation this really odd way, really new way that we were having to deal with. So that was really helpful, and they've been particularly useful in terms of conversations about how we might reopen the office on a partial basis in a couple of months' time or so. So I think I've really welcomed that too. And then maybe just a couple of things around public comms. So we worked very closely particularly with Eastern North Herts CCG. I think we were, and other partners in the local resilience forum. So the weekly, it's now fortnightly bulletin that I think people will have seen. Obviously, we contributed to that, and there was really very close working. We've had this comms cell working across all the partners, and in fact, I chaired that for a period. And particularly with Eastern North Herts CCG producing a weekly testing notification and press release. So, you know, because we did really want to make sure the public had an awareness of those issues. And then now on recovery, so we produced a patient information leaflet with West Herts Trust, and we're working very closely with them to make sure that the public understand where we are with recovery and the restarting of services. So I think that's all I can say. Hopefully there is more information in there. And if anybody wanted to ask me more outside of this meeting, I'll be very happy to talk about the work that we've done and the work that we're doing in the next few weeks and months.
Thanks, Julia. Any points or questions? I think the silence doesn't mean we don't appreciate it. I mean, can we just give a real vote of thanks to all of your team who have actually been working tirelessly, and you know, I think we've definitely seen their presence in many of the bit streams that we've been doing. So thank you for that. Okay, moving on then to the committee meetings, which I'm not going to go one by one through, but I'm going to ask if any of the executive team or the chairs of the individual committees wanted to highlight anything. This is your moment. So has anybody got anything they wanted to particularly highlight other than the fact that they're listed there? I'm getting blanks all around, so that's good. Okay, so we move on now to reviewing our conflicts of interest were managed in the meeting. We started off by saying that we didn't have any conflicts of interest, and I suppose we just need to reflect on whether there was anything else, anything that came up that perhaps challenged that.
No, I've not picked up anything.
Okay, reflection on equality and diversity in relation to decisions. I think there were several moments in today's board where we have actually picked up on that, particularly in terms of BAME, but not exclusively that. So I don't know if there's any other reflections on that. Some challenges, I think, in some of the discussions that we had. I know, Thelma, you were quite vocal on this. Is there anything that anybody wants to say in addition to what's already been stated? Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's been covered, Nicholas, but I think I put in the chat room there's possibly a health inequality around IT access and the user's ability to, and I don't think that comes through strongly. I don't know how we manage that, but I think it probably needs to be put in somewhere.
I think that's a really good point, actually. Yeah, John, Stuart, maybe, I think.
I'd like to support Brian on that. There's a very interesting Age UK paper published a few months ago, which points to a possible discriminatory impact in the poor and the elderly, which are two often overlapping groups, are the ones which are least skilled and have least access to IT. And it's very, very relevant to the new methods which are coming in post-COVID. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Okay, so I think that's a really strong theme that we need to encompass. Okay, thank you for that. Risks identified during the meeting. Iram.
Yeah, so just through the meeting, I've just picked up a few. I'll just go through them. The need for mental health support for children, potential that people have not been seeking support during the pandemic, and this is also focused on within the recovery. Significant numbers awaiting treatment and challenges to productivity. And then lastly, I've just got in reference to the BAF, some of the risks need to be articulated more clearly and the actions that we are taking to ensure that we address the needs of the BAME community.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Iram. Katie, was there anything else you might have reflected on that Iram's very eloquently described that?
No, I think she's picked everything up there. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful.
I think Paul's got something to comment. Yeah.
Oh right, sorry, I didn't see Paul's hand go up. Sorry, there we are. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we should probably just reflect on whether there is or is not an issue of any risk around information governance with the extended use of laptops across for consultations and elsewhere. All the stuff with all the virtual stuff we've put in place. Just to close that circle off.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. That brings us to the close. I'd like to thank, if there are any members of the public that are still watching, of course this is being recorded. We thank you for your participation. We also thank you for your patience, and members of the public, in actually adhering to the guidance of the way in which we conduct these meetings. We do have to have rules in order to make sure that we actually conduct the business of the board correctly. So I do, I acknowledge that those members of the public that have done that, I thank them. I think for those that haven't, I think they need to reflect. Thank you very much. Close the meeting.
for that, Nicholas.
I'm going to leave. David, I might just quickly do a quick call to you.